Well, good morning and welcome back to another hunt for Red October. The hunt so far has been pretty futile, as you'll have seen. And just a very quick note on that, this series is going to be more than just a couple of videos, and it may even get published more than just on a Sunday. It really is just all about the hunt, the exploration, and quite often there's just going to be images that are part of the story, part of the backstory, part of my process. So as an individual video they may be a bit, maybe as a full story of autumn or supposedly autumn, they may make a little bit more sense. Anyway, so come out to another little woodland, and obviously now I've come out to a little clearing just to record this piece, but it's quite a dark woodland and sunrise is about 5 or 10 minutes away. I think we will need a little bit of that light coming through now. There's a little bit of overcast clouds, again just about the exploration. So this is a bit of a linear path kind of up, it's along a river, and a little bit of mist on the river, but I don't think there's going to be too much, so I certainly don't think anything's going to come in here. What is nice about this woodland is there's quite a few little or big gnarly trees, or at least trees with nice kinks and things in them, which may make for something interesting, but we'll carry on wandering. So I've actually brought myself out of the woodland, as you can see, to the river's edge, and there is just a little small layer of mist, as I had said earlier. Might develop just a little bit. The problem being the trees behind me here, so obviously I can shoot across the river into those trees. The colour doesn't look great, and there's nothing that really kind of stands out, that sort of contrast of colour. Nice to look at. Now maybe if there was a little bit more light on that, maybe, but I just don't think the colour's that great, so I'm not sure I'm going to get the camera right, but as always I'll stand here for another few minutes and see whether anything does catch my eye. So I was just walking back from the river and I spotted this big old gnarly tree on the way out with just a little splash of early autumn colour amongst all of the greens, and I'll give that a whirl or a closer look when I start wandering back. And as I was wandering back, there was a very obviously linear path, and I kind of liked how the autumn colours from one tree almost looked as though they were part of one of the other trees, and so I started to sort of consider the very straightforward portrait orientation sort of image of that. But what really wasn't working was the off-center nature of it all. The far distant trunks were set to the right, and so it just threw that balance off. But as I kind of wandered close, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and make an image here anyway. And so I framed up a shot. What I really love is we now have, the sun's obviously been risen about 25 minutes, and we're obviously getting some reflective light coming in, and I just love how the light is hitting the trunks in the background and the trunk of the main tree as well. Now there's an obvious flaw, and we're getting in some of the sky, and that's completely unavoidable. So what I'll probably end up doing is a couple of images, one for the main canopy, one for the main forest, and then underexposing another image, just to see whether if I need to paint in any sort of darker areas, just to sort of avoid drawing the eye. Now it's okay, and here I've been thinking about this a while. I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I enjoy most of them. One of the things that I try to avoid, and someone had messaged me the other day about why I wasn't going into more technical detail about composition and you should do this and you should do this. This is my journey, and it's not I'm not going to tell you about composition too much, mostly because who am I to tell you? I point my camera at things that catch my eye, and I'm sure quite often they don't adhere to, you know, compositionally type stuff, but you know, to me, I'll be walking by a scene and something will catch my eye and I'll go, I quite like that, and so I'll make an image of it, and of course I'll try to make it work from a pleasing point of view and from a composition point of view, but I try to avoid on this channel turning around and saying, okay, this is what you have to do. Obviously, you know, on my workshops and things, when we're a bit more sort of one-to-one and the client is maybe asking, I might get into that, but you know, certainly on this channel, this is really just about what catches my eye. And what's really catching my eye in this here are those trunks in the background. So there you go. And we even have a little bit of pleasing autumn colour. And in fact, might keep an eye on this tree. You know, maybe in a week or so time there'll be a bit more colour, and you might even find the understory being a little bit more autumnal as well with some of those ferns. Rather nice. So actually still at this tree, I've actually moved myself a little bit further forward, and you know, one of the things I love about staying with a scene, your eye really does start to pick up little things, and it's so obvious now that I've seen it, but right on the tree trunk there's a big sort of marked, I'm not sure what it is, whether it's marked for disease or marked for something else, which maybe adds another little element to the story, you know, a marked man or something, who knows. Anyway, a couple of other things about this scene. Number one, I'd love maybe a little bit of, obviously mist, but even a drizzly day. Now I think later next week we are due to get some rain, and I think that would actually add an additional element to potentially diffuse the background. So again, it's all about, you know, logging away things. And secondly, because I'm kind of pointing my camera up to try to capture some of that canopy colour, top left hand corner up here there's a gap in the canopy letting in light, which is obviously to my advantage for bringing some light to those trunks, but if I'm not careful, the top left hand side of the frame is going to have a little bit of sort of diffusion, a little bit of sort of light leak coming in. Now, probably savable in post with a very slight graduated or radial filter, but just literally putting my hand over the top of the camera allows me to sort of just remove, it's a very small amount, but it just allows me to even out the light across the frame. But yeah, a little bit more colour and maybe a nice drizzly day, and we'll come back here. Don't always believe what you see on the internet. So I actually saw an image from this wood posted on a Facebook group yesterday, and it got me thinking, the colours maybe, I mean, this can quite often happen with autumn, which is why I just don't really freak out too much about peak autumn, because they can develop pretty quickly. And the image that was posted yesterday from this wood made it look as though the autumn colours were incredible, and I've just come across what I believe to be that scene. I think someone's been telling a few porkies. Still quite green, a little bit of colour on the floor, but certainly the leaves are not the colour that was posted, but each to their own. It's quite a nice scene. Again, major feature of this wood is the big sort of straight path that leads through it, but Now we're down, the sun's obviously risen over to my right, your left, and there's quite a big embankment now. I think that sun has maybe risen over that visible embankment, but it looks to be still obscured by some cloud, which is good because it is just bathing the whole area in a lovely sort of soft light. So I fear that if there's any gaps in those clouds out there, then obviously we'll be struggling, but yeah, I thought that was quite funny. So, come along to the river's edge, and time to break out the big boy. It's the Fuji 1-400. Love this lens, and the image stabilization on it is fantastic. Now, I'm recording this vlog on the X-T4. I haven't actually used the image stabilization of this lens on the X-T4, but I should probably give that a go. But I can quite often get a sharp image at an 80th of a second, or maybe even a bit lower, out at 300-400mm, which is incredible. So I just pulled myself down to the river. Now there's not a huge amount of light, but I'm just gonna handhold a couple of images and just see whether I can pick out some little pockets of potential colour. Again, not necessarily for this morning because that light is reasonably flat, but if there was just a little bit more sort of light on the scene, it might pick out some of those autumn colours. So I'll give that a go now with this big boy. Hi. Whoa. Extreme close up there. Another little scene here, but again I don't think it's going to work, mainly because we're below it, we're pointing up, and there's just a little bit too much sky in the frame now. Yeah, I quite liked how the front, it's probably not gonna, I quite liked how that front trunk is sort of leaning in, and then the one behind it, the slightly brighter one, is leaning the other way. But to get the kind of frame that I'm wanting, I think you're having to point quite a bit up into the sky, which is just a little bit frustrating. But, and for me, this is the perfect mixture of autumn colour on this tree. Not all autumnal, not all green. You've got lovely sort of gradients of colour, of autumnal colour. So I might go back here and see whether we can work something. Also spotted behind me. A cliche type of image, but there's one for in a bit. Right, go back and see whether I can make anything of this. So I've decided to go ahead and set up an image here. In fact, it's an image that I've already taken. And I was struggling with the simple portrait orientation. And then I started to consider, well, what if I was to put this into a panoramic? And so that's kind of what I've done. Now again, I think I've spoken about this before. I'm thinking of the panoramic not necessarily as the full panoramic, but even taking sort of little chunks of it that give me just a little bit more than the standard sort of portrait orientation. There's just some lovely sort of trees sort of bending this way and that, a little bit of sort of lovely autumn colour as well. Now, two things that are potentially going to be a problem. Firstly, again, the light coming in on the canopy. I've underexposed by about a third of a stop. I'm not blowing any highlights, but still might be a little bit bright. The one thing is, with it being a potential panoramic, I might be able to get away with a 16:9 crop or a slight crop on that to remove some of that canopy. Of course, one of the issues with that is the trees kind of have some of their nicest kinks and their bends just as that canopy's coming into view, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge in post, I think. And secondly, on the right hand side here, there's just a little sort of nondescript sapling, and I think that's going to be quite distracting in the final frame. Again, it's very easy for the brain to almost make that invisible to the eye as I'm looking at it, but as I'm sweeping across the frame and I'm looking at the back of the camera in the frame, I think that sapling's going to be a problem. Now, it might be that I can still get a pleasing image from a couple of the panoramic individual images without going all the way to the right with the little sapling. The other thing as well is I was originally looking at a composition that included some of the ferns, the original sort of portrait orientation, but I really would want these ferns to take on at least a little bit of autumn colour. They're very green at the moment, so. But we'll see. I think one of the things I like about it is there's depth to the image, as those trees sort of meander left and right through the frame, so a little bit of depth. Again, like I spoke about earlier, if we had a little bit of drizzle coming through here, you would get a little bit of that depth, but it would also be quite sort of subdued. So again, potentially one for the memory banks. Right, let's wander around. That sun now seems to have broken through, and we're starting to get some bright highlights in the woodland. So I think for now that's the hunt for Red October on pause again. Lovely little forest though, and certainly a couple of images that I would like to come back to maybe in a week's time, or certainly if we get a little bit of inclement weather moving through. And again, it's one of the things I'm just loving about this slow, sort of unpurposeful bimble. Just discovery, exploration, meditation, mindfulness, and hopefully at the end of 4 or 5 weeks time we'll come out with maybe a handful, 3 or 4 images that we're pleased with. So right guys, once again, hope you've enjoyed this little autumnal search. I'm going to head back now and grab myself a coffee, and until next time, take care. Bye bye.